Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to my devotions today. And I'm continuing in the spirit of who God has called us to be as people who are filled with God's Spirit, to live out our faithfulness in a way in which our lives bring witness and bring about God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. A kingdom that is filled with justice and rightness for all people. And in that it reflects the character of God's goodness and God's love and God's mercy and in God's grace. And so the passage that I've chosen for today is from Proverbs 6, and I'm going to begin with the 12th verse, but it's in actually two sections, two different Proverbs sections, and yet they're related to one another. The first is about, what is the character we're supposed to look up to, but it talks about the negative example, the scoundrel and the villain. Those are words we don't use too often. And the second is actually a definition of what is an abomination, so that we might understand that which is godly and that which is not. And we're doing this by understanding which is not, so that we might recognize it in our daily lives when we see it, so that we can act according to God's calling and not according to the way of the world. So let us read these two passages. And I'm going to read the first section, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, and then the second section and talk about it. And so hopefully it will be helpful. The first, a scoundrel and a villain, goes around with crooked speech, winking the eyes, shuffling the feet, pointing the fingers. With perverted mind, devising evil, continually sowing discord. On such a one, calamity will descend suddenly, in a moment, damage beyond repair. Yeah, that's the real concern. In a moment, damage beyond repair. So in this passage, I love the language of scoundrel and villain. We don't use that language very often. We often consider it rude. But they're just, when I was a child, I used to love to watch cartoons or the spaghetti westerns, and it was always easy to tell the scoundrel and the villain. The scoundrel and the villain was that person with the black mask or the black hat, and they're slinking around and they're causing trouble. And then you have the hero, the good guy. And in the same way in the spaghetti westerns, the bad guys always had the black hats and the black vest, where the good guy had the white hat, and so you could always clearly identify good from evil. Well, in real life, it's not quite that way. People are so much more complex than that, and the nature of sin in our lives, causes us to work too often in a selfish manner. And so then you can have people who are speaking, and they might be inviting us to share with them. They say some things that we can identify with, that we can appreciate. We think, oh, they're onto something here, and then they draw our attention, and we kind of want to follow. But then, as we come to know them, we might discover that they're quick to kind of point out what they don't like in life, but they really don't know how to get to what is good. Have you ever worked with someone who's constantly finding fault with others, who's pointing that finger and saying, well, you need to do this and that, but they are never able to take accountability for their own actions or how their actions contributed to whatever was not going right? And it's not like they have an intent towards evil. It's more subtle than that. But that kind of behavior will often bring dissension, will often bring conflict, will often bring discord. And then suddenly things collapse, and it can be a moment beyond repair. How do we discern when that is going on? And as I said, initially they might sound like people who we can really affiliate with. They're onto something here, and we join in. And then there can be that moment, oh, is this what this is about? Sometimes we feel betrayed. Sometimes we feel embarrassed that we've been associated with that. Sometimes we, in our pride, don't want to admit that this is going in a way that's not helpful. And so we double down and continue to support that person, and we defend that person, and we keep hoping that the rightness will come forward in a good way. In many respects, it's good to be graceful, grace-filled, and to love and care, but we also need to then help guide and teach so that person can amend their ways. The second part of this passage starts at verse 16 and says this is where God teaches about what does God mean by an abomination. You hear that language in the Old Testament. What's an abomination? There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that hurry to run to evil, a lying witness who testifies falsely, and the one who sows discord in the family. Wow, we can see some of this stuff. Part of the reason that we have all the outrage and the protests is because there's a hand that shed innocent blood. And the 4 officers up in Minneapolis have now been charged with important charges, and that might be the beginning of the healing here, because if there is genuine justice that takes place. But it was a disturbing thing to watch, to see a man die before our eyes on video that's been floating around social media and in the news. It's a disturbing thing to see someone who sheds innocent blood. We saw it again a couple of weeks ago when Aubrey Ahmad was first kind of tackled, or there were 2 white men who descended upon him, and they were charging him with the idea of being in the wrong place. He shouldn't be in that neighborhood, exactly. And so they attacked him, and eventually led to his being shot by them. And we witnessed it. Our hearts were sick because hands that shed innocent blood, feet that hurry to run to evil. But it's more than this. We hear about the lying tongue. Well, when we talk about our politics, by golly, people say, well, everybody lies. I think that's a bit of a cop-out. There are those political differences where we can talk about, such as Obama when he made the statement that, under the health plan, the ACA, that everybody could keep their doctor. Well, in the final details, that wasn't true, but that was the aspiration. And so you can say, well, he lied about that. Well, yeah, that was the aspiration, and yes, it was not exactly true in how it came out. But does that make him a liar? Or does it make him one who was aspiring for something greater? We can call things a lie when we disagree with them. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a lie. And then you have behaviors that are perpetual. I think about Lindsey Graham as one who is on videotape from prior years of service where he was calling out and asking for our moral character to rise, and this is why we had to behave in such a way. And now, what has happened with him? His outrage in what happened to his moral character, because it certainly isn't standing up like it was before. We discover that really what he's all about, his impassioned speeches are really about maintaining power and control. And he supports a president who has talked about things that many people resonate and were hopeful for, that he could bring real solution to people's lives where they were deeply affected. And yet there's a character flaw within him the nature of sin within him that he lies perpetually. Things that can be obviously shown to be false, and he cannot recognize that. Why is that the case? I just don't know. But what we've seen now in his behavior is that it's been divisive. He, as General James Mattis said, he has, in his letter just the other day, this is a man that, as he got to work with him, was continually working to divide, not to unite people. He was always seeking division and still is, and this puts our constitutional democracy in jeopardy. Our leadership has to be of strong ethical character. And so we have to sort out those who are scoundrels and villains. We have to recognize those who are seeking discord, whether for their own gain or whatever. And we have to begin to work for God's kingdom. Now, I've identified two particular politicians, and I think about the disingenuousness of Representative Elliot Engel the other day, in which, he maybe let down a very, he was at a campaign event he really didn't want to be at because, I don't know, maybe he was taking his people for granted. Maybe it was just weariness. Maybe it's his character. But all of a sudden, he doesn't look so good, does he? All of a sudden, you wonder, can you count on him? Is he who he says he is? These are the questions that we have to sort out. Is he one who just says what he wants us to believe and then does something different? These are the questions that we have to ask, because those that we put in leadership and in charge, they have actual power to affect our lives, and so their character needs to be above reproach. And just like law enforcement, they are enacting the laws in our society, and so they are put into a position of power and trust, and so they have to rise to that occasion. We have to be able to trust them, to be able to bring justice for all people. And they have to be of character that can rise above whatever is presented to them for the sake of our society. So let us be careful. We have to be on the lookout for those who sow discord in a family, those who devise wicked plans, those feet that hurry to run to evil, such as the rioters, bringing destruction. These are the things, and then the lying tongue, which is the foundation of so much of this. These are the things that we must be aware of, and we cannot fool ourselves. My hope is that God will lead us through these very difficult times and show us the blessing that we need. I pray for our leaders that they may be faithful to their calling. I struggle because I don't see any evidence that they want to be. So we continue to pray, asking for God's Spirit to dwell in us, to lead us into the right, so that God's kingdom, with all of its goodness, can be seen once again. Would you pray with me and join in these efforts to call God to act and to help us to make those right choices that can bring about the kind of life that we seek in God's kingdom. Amen.